Thank you for watching NMH at 1, where we highlight the news making headlines in the land of the brave and beyond, ranging from current affairs, community stories, sports, and economic news. In the news today, Hungary unmoved, unshaken. Not enough money for investigations, says the Anti-Corruption Commission. UIS wants illegal mining gone. I am Glenn Shipura to bring you these stories and more. In today's midday news update, Women at Work Training Center announced the graduation of 11 students from the first hospitality course of 2023 and the inaugural bakers course introduced this year. 5 students graduated from the first hospitality course and another 6 students completed the pioneering bakers course to equip young women with essential baking skills to start their community bakeries. Remember to engage with these stories on our social media throughout the broadcast. Visual news follows after the break.
Flex is your health and fitness show that focuses on the health of the mind, body and spirit. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, contact zone@synergy.com.na.
Let's take a look at our visual news. The mayor of Walvis Bay, Trevina Forbes, on Thursday expressed his disappointment towards the low turnout of community members at last week's Wednesday public consultative meeting, which took place at Emmanuel Reuters in Kuisebmund. He made the remarks at an ordinary council meeting held at the Kuisebmund Chambers.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today my speech will be very short. I don't really like this morning council meetings. It doesn't go off quite the same as the evening ones. On Tuesday, 21 March, we celebrated 33 years of independence. Although we celebrate independence, there is glory. True independence or economic independence is not yet a reality. Most of our people cannot claim ownership of their property, as too many are jobless, and too many disease and social evils are killing our people unnecessarily. Our continuous goal should always be to be united and to become prosperous as a nation. This week we are busy with public consultation meetings for the budget. I have to air my disappointment with the turnout at last night's public meeting in Kuisebmund, where a total of 70 residents turned up from the community, from a community of about 50,000 people. So only 70 were there. Despite the low turn up, what was clear from the residents was the encouragement for us to unite as council for the betterment of our town and the great opportunities to reduce the high rate of unemployment in Walvis Bay amongst our youth. I encourage the public to come out in numbers, as there are still 2 public meetings in Narabo Community Hall tonight at 6 o'clock and the Town Hall tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock also. Engaging and consulting the residents for the 2023-2024 council budget. That is all I have to say.
Deputy Executive Director of Education, Eda Bon, delivered the keynote address at the official opening of the Colloquium on Namibian Boys' Underachievement and Under-Participation in Education. Bon advised that the growth and academic achievement of girls in education should be looked at, and thereafter looked at ways to enhance that of boys' education in Namibia. The Today event is hosted at the University of Namibia's Commersdal campus.
To apply principles of equity and affirmative action, targeted mechanisms and support have been put in place and are being put in place to protect women and girls from acts of injustice, unfairness, prejudice and discrimination. For instance, at the global level, the targeted support for girls' education has for more than 3 decades been promoted through initiatives that include the the United Nations Girls Education Initiative, Women in Development, Sustainable Development Goals, Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and Girls, the Education 21st Century. At the African continental level, African girls have been supported in education through the avenues and instruments of the Forum for African Women Educationists, African Union Gender Policy of 2009, Neo Partnership for Africa's Development, Africa Charter on Humans and People's Rights, and the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa of 2004. At the national level, Namibians girls' education has been specifically supported by the Forum of African Women Educationalists, the Namibian chapter, or commonly known as FAWENA, and through the Gender Mainstreaming in Education program. Although it might be argued that the targeted support that girls received over the years increased their access to education, retention in school, and increased their achievement in education, one should not settle for this argument only. Further questions should be asked about what girls do that enhance their academic achievement, and what boys do that undermines their academic achievement. One thing that we should not lose sight of is to celebrate the education gains that girls are displaying and work out strategies of how to support and enhance the boys' education.
Fly Namibia responded to the incident of a woman with physical disabilities being denied boarding earlier this month and said it became clear during discussions that there is a lack of understanding of the specific needs and requirements of disabled passengers, and more needs to be done to educate and sensitize all involved in the travel experience, said Fly Namibia's Managing Director, Andre Kompion.
Specific needs and requirements of those passengers, and much more should be done to educate and sensitize all involved in the travel experience. Namibia is a signatory of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and is bound to comply with the requirements of the Convention. It's furthermore imperative that the use of disability as a human rights agenda is addressed to ensure equal treatment of all citizens as required by the Namibian Constitution. In the light of the above, Fly Namibia has committed to arrange a stakeholder conference whereby all role players in the airline industry in Namibia will be involved, including the Deputy Minister of Disability Affairs and all interested parties. That will include the Namibian Airports Company, the Namibian Civil Aviation Authority, the police, everybody involved in dealing with passengers at airports in our industry. The incident in which Ms. Mbonji was involved clearly illustrates the need to educate all role players on the specific needs of persons with disabilities. Fly Namibia is committed to play its role in ensuring that no person will experience any form of discrimination when dealing with the airline industry in Namibia. Fly Namibia wants to again express its sincerest remorse for the unfortunate incident involving Ms. Mbonji, and wishes to assure the public at large that every measure shall be taken to prevent a repetition from such an occurrence. I thank you.
The opposition member of the parliament says she will continue to stand in solidarity on the streets with those who elected her. An update on this story follows in the newspaper review segment.
Active Kids is an initiative under the MyZone brand that aims to provide exciting and easy activities and fun stories. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, contact zone@synergy.com.na. Active Kids, where we actively invest in your future.
Getting into our newspaper review, the Namibian Sun's front page reports that Member of Parliament Ina Hengari, who was granted bail of 5,000 Namibian on Friday following her arrest on Independence Day during youth unemployment protests, says she will continue to unapologetically stand with the people who elected her. The Popular Democratic Movement politician spent 3 nights in police custody after participating in a peaceful but unauthorized demonstration attended by scores of unemployed youths in Katutura. On page 3, the paper informs that the government forked out nearly 2.1 million for 23 state funerals during the 2022 to 2023 financial year. According to Deputy Prime Minister Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, the Office of the Prime Minister spent over 4.8 million Namibian dollars in total on state events during the fiscal year under review, of which she said just over 2.05 million Namibian dollars was spent on state funerals. The 32nd Independence Day celebrations in Swakopmund cost just over 1 million, while the Heroes Day commemoration in Mariental incurred expenses exceeding 1.8 million Namibian dollars. Republican informs that Mariental farmer Johan Meyer, who faces a criminal and civil case for the killing of Hendrina Mupolo, a 9-year-old girl he ran over with his bakkie last year, says he tried to avoid the accident. A child suddenly jumped behind a window while I was driving. When she jumped up, she was right in front of the car. I immediately swerved and braked. I jumped out and went to the child. People ran closer and shouted and chaos broke out, Mayor said in a statement. On page 3, Mike Dupriest, the owner of a petrol station in Rundu, who was filmed hitting each other on the buttocks with a stick and what he described as a game, has been fined 500 Namibian dollars after one of his former employees filed a case of assault against him. On its front page, the Allgemeine Zeitung today leads with the in-situ leaching process that the exploration company Hatspring Investments, in principle a Rosatom subsidiary, wants to apply in the Stamprit aquifer, which has now also become a hot topic at the UN Water Conference. Meanwhile, the message from last week's major event is clear. The world's groundwater resources needs to be managed much better and more prudently. On page 3 of the Allgemeine Zeitung, you can read up on Fly Namibia, which has committed to organizing a stakeholder conference to promote disability awareness after Elizabeth Angonji, Miss Ability 2022, was denied boarding a plane due to her physical disability. This is a very nice story showing how media engagement on behalf of a complainant can lead to a smart solution for an affected community. All you needed was Ms. Angonji, who turned to the media and insisted that a difference had to be made, and a company which is prepared to listen to reasonable arguments. Congrats to both parties for making a difference. We continue with our newspaper review right after the break.
The Agenda is a weekly national affairs interview program hosted every Sunday by Namibian Sun editor Toyvon Jabela, featuring a panel of high-profile newsmakers, analysts, and experts. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, contact agenda@synergy.com.na. The Agenda, focused on today's conversation.
For the second part of our newspaper review, the Namibian newspaper reports that the Anti-Corruption Commission wants to reconsider its funding model, saying there is a lack of resources for its investigations. The ACC uses 11% of its entire 73.9 million Namibian dollars budget for investigations, while the bulk is spent on remuneration and related expenditure. On page 3, a lawyer representing British businessman and farm owner Harvey Bolter says a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in which 6 Saudi Arabian investors are suing Bolter is hopelessly flawed. Bolter is denying allegations that he made misrepresentations to investors who later sued him in a court in Dubai and are trying to have that court's judgment enforced in Namibia, lawyer Susan Amanje said. On New Era, it is reported on page 1 that Ui's residents have vowed to take matters into their own hands if illegal mining activities in and around the town are not stopped by the government. In fact, many residents are now questioning the legitimacy of some lithium mines operating in the area. The residents claim that some of the mining companies only have licenses for semi-precious stones, yet are mining rare earth metals such as conducting mining operations without environmental clearance certificates or blasting tickets, posing a risk and safety issue to both residents and the environment. In a recent heated town hall meeting, residents demanded answers from the Mines and Energy Minister, who visited the Dares constituency to discuss issues raised about illegal mining activities. On page 3, the Health Ministry says, although Namibia has not yet reported cases of the extremely dangerous Marburg virus, there is a need to be on high alert and vigilance, especially at the main border crossing as well as in public and private facilities. On the 21st of March, the Tanzanian Health Ministry declared an outbreak of the Marburg virus disease in the East African country due to increased activity related to international travel and trade, population displacement and migration. The country remains at risk of importation of Marburg viral disease, informed Health Ministry Executive Director Ben Nangombe. On to Market Watch, European banking stocks fell sharply on Friday, with Deutsche Bank and UBS knocked by worries that actions by regulators and central banks have not yet contained the worst problems to face the sector since the 2008 global financial crisis. Financial market stress indicators were also again flashing warning signs more widely, with the euro falling against the US dollar and bond yields singing. Deutsche Bank shares fell for a third day, dropping more than 12% after a sharp jump in the cost of insuring its bonds against the risk of default. Walvis Bay proposes aquaculture zones. More on this story in Economic News.
My.NA Property Show provides viewers with the best in-class content, engaging interviews, as well as a showcase of the latest property-related products and services. If you would like to feature your brand or your campaign on this platform, contact My.NA at synergy.com.na. My.NA Properties, more than just a roof over your head.
Getting into our economic news, the Walvis Bay Municipal Management Committee has recommended that Council grant approval for urban 433 to 444 at Dolphin Beach Extension 2 to be declared an aquaculture development zone. The sites are located between the new Sadek Gateway Port, Northport, and Dolphin Beach Extension 1, Aphrodite Beach, across the Guano platform. The municipality has set aside 12 urban at Dolphin Beach Extension 2 for aquaculture development, and the aforesaid urban are zoned aquaculture in terms of the Walvis Bay Town Planning Scheme and in accordance with the Urban and Regional Planning Act No. 5 of 2018. The urban have not been officially declared as aquaculture development zones in terms of the Aquaculture Act No. 18 of 2002, with the minister being responsible for the declaration of these. The management committee has thus called on the municipality to formally submit the suggestion about the intended development for the attention of the fisheries minister. Once the area is declared, it will be strictly used for mariculture and aquaculture purposes. This will also make it difficult for the plots to be rezoned for any other purposes. Let's take a look at our economic indicators. $1 US trades for $18 million and 18 cents. First rent Namibia stocks are now at 37 Namibian dollars after a 2.2% price increase on the NSX. Trasco Group Holdings Limited stocks are down by 9.1%, now trading at 50 cents on the NSX. Platinum, copper, and zinc prices have dropped in price, while other commodity prices have increased. U.S. Vice President Harris promises greater investment for Africa. Stay with NMH at 1.
Africa Good Morning is a current affairs program that brings you the latest from Southern Africa and beyond. News, economics, sport, weather, interviews, and so much more. For any advertising or news-related queries, contact AGM at synergy.com.na. Africa Good Morning, bringing Africa to you.
Let's take a look at news from across the continent. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris said on Sunday that the United States will increase investment in Africa and help spur economic growth as she began a week-long tour of the continent aimed at offering a counter to the influence of rival China. China has invested heavily in Africa in recent decades, including in infrastructure and resources development, while Russian influence has also grown, including through the deployment of troops from Russia's private military contractor Wagner Group to aid governments in several countries. On this trip, I intend to do work that is focused on increasing investments here on the continent and facilitating economic growth and opportunity, Harris said shortly after touching down in Ghana, the first destination in a trip that will include visits to Tanzania and Zambia. The administration of U.S. President Joe Biden has sought to strengthen ties with Africa, in part to offer an alternative to rival powers. In December, ahead of a U.S.-Africa summit, the U.S. committed $55 billion to the continent over the next 3 years. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced $150 million in new humanitarian aid for Africa's Sahel region during a visit to Niger this month. Biden is yet to visit Africa as president. In our next story, Rwanda plans to amend its constitution to allow for presidential and parliamentary elections to be held at the same time, according to a statement outlining cabinet resolutions seen by Reuters on Saturday. The statement said the cabinet on Friday approved a proposal by President Paul Kagame to amend the country's constitution to allow harmonization of parliamentary and presidential election calendars. It did not say when the amendment would become effective. Parliamentary elections are currently scheduled to take place in August this year, but if the constitutional change is implemented, they may be pushed back to next year to be held simultaneously with presidential polls. The East African country last amended its constitution in 2015 to allow Kagame to extend his rule by a 7-year term commencing in 2017, followed by 2 further 5-year terms. The lawmaker's term is 5 years. We now take a look at our international news shortly. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition plunged into chaos earlier today after mass overnight protests over the sacking of his defense chief piled pressure on the government to halt its bitterly contested plans to overhaul the judiciary. Netanyahu had been expected to make a televised statement on Monday morning announcing the plans had been suspended, but amid reports that his nationalist religious coalition risked breaking apart, Israeli TV station said the statement was postponed. Earlier, a source in his Likud party and another source closely involved in the legislation said Netanyahu would suspend the overhaul, which has ignited some of Israel's biggest ever demonstrations and drew on intervention by the head of state. For the sake of the unity of the people of Israel, for the sake of responsibility, I call on you to stop the legislative process immediately, President Isaac Herzog said on Twitter. The warning by Herzog, who is supposed to stand above politics and whose function is largely ceremonial, underlined the alarm that the divisions triggered by the proposals have caused. It followed a dramatic night of protests in cities across Israel, with tens of thousands flooding the streets following Netanyahu's announcement that he had dismissed Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. In our next story, the first hearing in a lawsuit brought by Prince Harry, singer Elton John, and other high-profile figures against the publisher of the Daily Mail newspaper over alleged phone tapping and other breaches of privacy is due to begin today. The 7 claimants, which include actresses Elizabeth Hurley and Sadie Frost, and Elton John's husband and filmmaker David Furnish, launched the action last year, but legal restrictions requested by the newspaper group mean specific details of the allegations have not so far been made public. According to a statement released on October by lawyers for Frost and Harry, the younger son of King Charles, the case against Associated Newspapers include bugging people's calls, cars, and homes, and paying police for sensitive information. We'll get into our local sports news right after the break.
Straight Talk is a debate competition for high school learners and a spelling competition for primary school learners, mostly focusing on current affairs among the youth. Contact Zone at synergy.com.na to share your products and services. Straight Talk. Don't raise your voice, improve your argument.
Getting into our local sports news, World Athletics last week banned athletes who are transgender women or who have differences in sexual development from competing in elite track and field competitions effective 31 March. Namibia's top athletes Christine Boma and Beatrice Masalingi have been classified as DSD athletes. DSD is a rare condition characterized by a mix of male and female hormones, genes, and/or reproductive organs. The second edition of the National Amateur Boxing Championship produced 102 action-packed fights involving female and male boxers over 3 days in Kuisebmund, including 13 final bouts. The tournament saw over 130 boxers from 12 regions compete for a place in the Namibian National Amateur Boxing Team at the multi-purpose. Boxers from Erongo continued their dominance at the event by collecting 43 points, 5 gold and 6 silver medals, and securing first place. We now take a look at our international sports news. Antonio Conte has left Tottenham by mutual agreement after 16 months in charge, the Premier League club announced on Sunday. His departure comes after the Italians' extraordinary post-match rant following a 3-3 draw at Southampton on March 18, a game in which they blew a 3-1 lead. The Cell Sea Sharks' travails in the Vodacom United Rugby Championships will be put on hold this weekend when Siya Kolosi's men switch their attention to their important round of 16 Heineken Championships Cup clash with Munster or at Hollywood Bet's Kings Park. If you are just joining us, this is NMH at 1, and we'll get into the highlights from today's broadcast after this short break.
AgriMonitor is jou weeklikse landboukundige program wat jou die jongste nuus in die landbouverwante bedryf en onderwerpe wat daaraan gekoppel is, bring. Vir enige advertensie of nuusverwante navraag, kontak agrimonitor@synergy.com.na.
Getting into the highlights from today's broadcast, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris said on Sunday that the United States will increase investments in Africa and help spur economic growth as she began a week-long tour of the continent aimed at offering a counter to the influence of rival China. Israel Prime Minister coalition plunged into chaos earlier today after mass overnight protests over the sacking of his defense chief piled pressure on the government to halt its bitterly contested plans to overhaul the judiciary. World Athletics last week banned athletes who are transgender women or who have differences in sexual development from competing in elite track and field competitions effective 31 March. Those have been your highlights. Remember to tune in every weekday at 1 p.m. to spend your lunch hour with NMH at 1, catching up on the latest news in Namibia, Africa, and the world, ranging from current affairs, economic news, sports, and international headlines. It's goodbye from us in studio. Have a fantastic day.